What if I told you this tiny state, smaller than some cities, decided the fate of America 3 times? First by beating Washington across the Delaware, yes, really. Then by becoming the first state in the Union, and finally by secretly funding both sides in the Civil War. This is the untold history of Delaware, where revolutionary spies, corporate loopholes, and political power collide in just 2,000 square miles. Whispers beneath the pines, the forgotten paths of the first Delaware. Long before European ships pierced the mists of the Atlantic coast, Delaware's forests whispered with the stories of the Lenni-Lenape and the Nanticoke. People of rivers, sky, and earth. They hunted, fished, and farmed beneath the ancient trees, trading furs and living in balance with the land. But then came a slow unraveling. A rising tide of settlers brought conflict and commerce, disease and displacement. The fur trade, once a tool of survival, became a trap, pulling the Lenape into deadly rivalries and driving them from their sacred riverbanks. By the time the Iroquois shattered the Susquehannock, the Lenape had already begun their quiet exodus over the mountains, while others stayed and faded into the records, baptized, renamed, reclassified, nearly erased. Today, their echoes still linger in Delaware's place names and landscapes. If you listen closely, the land remembers, even if history tried to forget. The storms of settlement, a land torn by conquest. In the early 1600s, the land that would become Delaware was a place of ambition and bloodshed, where European dreams collided with indigenous reality. The Dutch arrived first, building Zwannendale in 1631, but within a year, a deadly dispute with native tribes erased their presence from the land. Yet the waves of settlers did not cease. In 1638, the Swedes planted their flag at Fort Christina, but by 1655, the relentless Dutch, led by Peter Stuyvesant, swept in and absorbed the Swedish colony into the Dutch New Netherland. Not long after, in 1664, the Dutch themselves fell to English ships, paving the way for the Duke of York's dubious claim. But it was William Penn, the Quaker visionary, who would leave his mark, carving out the lower counties on the Delaware and dreaming of a unified seabound province. Yet, even as Penn's ideals of unity began to fray, the lower counties sought their own path, separating from Pennsylvania in 1704. Through it all, Delaware's fate was shaped by the dual forces of European conquest and the enslaved labor that built its tobacco economy. A land carved by violence, ambition, and a history that would echo through centuries. Delaware's defiant stand, a revolution forged in courage. Though Delaware's loyalty to Britain ran deep, the winds of rebellion were undeniable, and the hearts of its leaders burned with the flame of freedom. Initially, the lower counties on the Delaware hesitated, enjoying good relations with Britain and their proprietary government. But the Stamp Act stirred fury in figures like Thomas McKean, while John Dickinson's pen became a weapon for revolution. It was only through the midnight ride of Caesar Rodney, overcoming personal doubt and physical pain, that Delaware cast its crucial vote for independence on June 15, 1776. As the war raged, Delaware's proud Delaware Blues Regiment fought valiantly, with the Battle of Couch's Bridge marking the state's only significant engagement on its soil. But even as the British marched through, capturing Wilmington and crushing morale, the resilience of the Patriots never faltered. Slaves, seeking freedom in the British lines, added to the turmoil, while Delaware's leaders would go on to shape the emerging nation's foundation, calling for unity and equality in the fledgling republic. Delaware's legacy was forged not in the battles fought on its land, but in the hearts of those who dared to defy the crown, ensuring the voice of a small state would echo in the heart of a new nation. Shackles of the past, Delaware's struggle with slavery and race. Delaware's complex relationship with slavery was shaped by the labor needs of a growing agricultural economy, largely influenced by settlers from Maryland and Virginia. In the early years, the distinction between indentured servant and slave was blurry, but as economic conditions improved in England, the line between the two hardened, and African slaves were increasingly imported to work the land. Over time, however, Delaware's agricultural shift from tobacco to mixed farming led to a decline in the need for slaves. Yet, even as the tide turned, slavery's grip on the state did not easily loosen. In the wake of the American Revolution, abolitionist forces, including Quakers and Methodists, spurred a wave of manumissions, with large slaveholders like John Dickinson freeing his 37 slaves in 1777. By 1810, three-quarters of African Americans in Delaware were free, a remarkable shift from earlier decades. The state was slow to abolish slavery completely, yet by the Civil War, 91.7% of the black population was free. Despite voting against secession and remaining loyal to the Union, Delaware's resistance to ratifying the key post-war amendments, those ending slavery and granting civil rights, kept the state bound to its past until 1901. Amidst this painful history, figures like Peter Spencer emerged, leading the African Union First Colored Methodist Protestant Church and fostering a sense of community and resilience for generations to come. Delaware's story is one of struggle, slow progress, and defiance, as it wrestled with its dark legacy while planting the seeds for future change. The rise and struggle, Delaware's path through Reconstruction and industrialization. In the aftermath of the Civil War, Delaware, like much of the South, struggled to shake off the shackles of its past. The Reconstruction era was marred by fierce resistance to racial equality, as Democratic leaders imposed white supremacy through discriminatory laws and practices. In 1866, Delaware's legislature declared black people second-class citizens, and despite the passage of the 15th Amendment, voting rights were restricted. Segregation became law, with the state's constitution mandating separate schools and public facilities for black and white citizens. But as the 19th century drew to a close, Delaware began to shift from its troubled past toward industrial growth. Wilmington blossomed into a manufacturing hub, with DuPont rising to dominate the state's economy. The city's growth, however, highlighted the deep political divide between the North and South, with southern counties retaining disproportionate power despite the region's changes. Throughout it all, the DuPonts wielded their influence in shaping the state's politics, even through rivalries with figures like John Adams. The economic boom of World War I brought Delaware to the forefront, with DuPont supplying vital materials for the war effort and investing in education, including schools for black children and women. Though Delaware fared better than many during the Great Depression, its shift from agrarian to industrial had already begun, as migration from the rural South began to reshape the state's landscape, physically and politically. The shifting sands, Delaware from World War II to the modern era. In the wake of World War II, Delaware surged into a new era, its industries booming once more, particularly in gunpowder production and shipbuilding. This economic expansion attracted waves of black migrants from the rural South to Wilmington, where their population skyrocketed, from just 15% in 1950 to more than half by 1980. However, this migration sparked a tide of white flight, segregating the state into de facto racial divisions. Despite efforts to integrate schools, Delaware's progress was slow. Its last segregated school didn't close until 1970, and the city of Milford was a hotbed of resistance in 1954 when black students were enrolled in an all-white high school. While these struggles for equality were a battle, they ultimately fueled landmark decisions like Brown versus Board of Education, setting the stage for Delaware's gradual but painful march toward integration. The social upheaval, including riots in Wilmington after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., highlighted the deep racial tensions that persisted into the late 1960s. But throughout it all, Delaware remained a prosperous state, thriving in its strategic location between major metropolitan hubs. Its growth was fueled by an influx of both American and immigrant populations, reshaping the state's demographic landscape. By 1990, only half of Delaware's residents were natives. Amidst these changes, Delaware continues to evolve, its history a testament to resilience and the ongoing pursuit of equality and prosperity. So, does Delaware deserve more historical credit? Should other states copy its corporate strategy? Debate below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten American history, smash like/subscribe. Next, we're revealing why Rhode Island/Pennsylvania was even wilder. Hit the bell on History Love so you don't miss it.